And you smell like one too. It is on this day, 1 year ago, that the Sesamerot answered its very first question, which was a question about the protocols of applying for a new job while you're in a job that you don't like. An inquiry which, at its heart, wouldn't happen outside of a capitalist structure. I mean, imagine that. Thinking of the protocol to, as politely as possible, separate yourself from the person who is disrespecting and abusing you. Now, not only is this episode the 1 year anniversary of Sesamerot, but it's also the 300th episode of the series. And I can tell from this spread that this is a question that Sesamerot has been wanting to answer for a long time. I think the reason why we're seeing the different card in the problem slot is because what a lot of people think of capitalism is different from what it actually is. A lot of us think capitalism is that free market thing where companies sort of run everything and everything is based on the value of a dollar, idiotic. When in reality, capitalism is ruled by capitalists. Living in a society does not make you a capitalist. In fact, it puts you on a different stratosphere. Notice, by the way, that the little ducky down here in the different card is the same little ducky that appears in the one of duckies, a card about people who are exploited or who only serve a specific purpose. Capitalism is a society that uplifts the capitalists at the expense of the exploited. Well, if that's the case, then why does the lemonade stand appear as a short-term solution? Well, it's because Zoe knows the value of her own labor. Instead of playing this rigged system, she went into business for herself. Also notice that even though she seems to have cornered the market on lemonade here, she's not charging out the nose for it. She knows that this is a fair market value, and she's not taking advantage of her position to overcharge or enrich herself beyond what is necessary for her to get by, maybe have a little bit of extra on the side, and pay for her operation. What we are seeing here is a demonstration of the understanding and respect for value. And speaking of value, let's take a look at the watch in the long-term slot. Now, you may have noticed that in most of my other videos that aren't Sesamerot, I always end them with the phrase, "Thank you for your time." This is a phrase I use to show my appreciation for the time you have given me when watching these videos. It is part of my core belief that time itself has value and your time is valuable. And I am grateful for your time being given to me to listen to these things. So core to fighting back against these attitudes here is to understand and respect the value of your time and everybody else's time. So in short, advocate for yourself, know your value, say happy birthday to the Sesamerot, which, by the way, the Sesamerot has spoken. Happy birthday. I know it can feel rough when you find out that one of your favorite creators is problematic. And it's easy to take that personal. After all, you were in their fan group and in their community and very supportive of them during the time when they was not showing off how problematic they were. But notice that Zoe is in both the in card and the lemonade card. Making you feel like part of their community was part of their job. Keyword their business model. Notice in the lemonade card that it is Zoe that is running the entire operation, not the fans. You don't have control over the operation. What you do have control over is yourself, and that is what the octagon over here represents, the authority you have over your own actions. You can't change the past, and you can't change the business model, so change the only thing you can change, your support. The Sesamerot has spoken. Now this is interesting. We have the 20 of stars appearing here in the problem slot. You see, we are all special and unique, and yet because we all shine, there's really nothing special about that in particular. Now I can't help but notice that you have qualified your question by including that you are an older student. It doesn't matter how old you are starting from the bottom. Allow this to provide you with the necessary humility that you need to gain the education that you are seeking. The same education that everybody else is seeking. In your long-term solution slot, the orange hexagon usually means we've got some complications coming up. You are going to be experiencing a thing that I like to call the problems we look forward to having. These will be challenges that you've always wanted to face. So the message I'm getting overall from this reading is, make sure you're maintaining the right attitude. You don't have to be better than everybody else to be the very best that you can be. The Sesamerot has spoken. Let's take a look at the kite rhombus in the problem slot. Notice how we're paying a lot of attention to the pretty perspective here. That's what a rhombus represents, but not paying so much attention to where we're going. This is a reminder that art itself is very freeing, it's very liberating, but a lot of the things that make life difficult for an artist have nothing to do with art. Let's keep in mind that it's the realities of life that are what's making it a slog. Notice how Big Bird is in the pull card here, showing that there's a lot of hard work involved in being alive. That's just the reality of life. For most people, they seek out art as a distraction from that, but as an artist, well, that is your whole life. So try to remember, it isn't art that's making you hungry if you haven't eaten after a while, or requiring you to be indoors during a rainstorm. So try to make art that is a relief from unhappiness, not a path to it. The Sesamerot has spoken. The rhombus is a sign of perspective, and in this case, I think that's why it's in the problem slot. We've got a little problem with perspective going on here. For a solution, the Sesamerot has drawn the 1 of teddy bears and the 20 of stars. Now, putting aside for a moment that you had no problem asking me for help, and that should be a good sign, we're going to do a little thought experiment, okay? In a moment, I'm going to ask you to pause the video and write down the names of 20 people you think are really cool or really awesome or people you aspire to be like. Okay, pause it now and go. Now, if any of those 20 people asked you for help, would you help them? What if I told you that you were just as important as these 20 jokers? In fact, more so, because you are the most important person in your own life. You deserve help just as much as they do, so act like it. The Sesamerot has spoken. Well, triple Grovers, you've won some kind of jackpot. Anyway, we're seeing the low super Grover here in the problem slot, which tells me that you see a problem and you want to solve it. That's just the bare bones of it. Now, in the short and long-term solution slot, we're seeing the quilt and the hot card, respectively. Now, if someone's problem is that they're hot, then coming along with a quilt might not seem like an ideal solution. Especially since they have some solutions of their own. They could drink the water. They could take off the tracksuit. Smothering them with a quilt is probably not a good idea, but you could probably wave that quilt up and down and make like a cool breeze. But that might be a little over the top, a little silly, and might not even be necessary. With that said, you have the right attitude. You're by their side. You are willing to empathize with their problem. So you're in a perfect position to jump in if they do ask for help. The Sesamerot has spoken. It is so weird to me that it's only now occurring to me that the rhombus card and the kite card use the exact same art. Now, a rhombus usually represents in the Sesamerot some sort of complex thought, especially one based on one's personal perspectives, whereas the kite usually just refers to playing with a kite. More specifically, abandoning thought and just having fun with your surroundings. Which does raise the question, why are we seeing the umpire in the short-term solution slot? I suppose if we were to look at this entire thing as a tableau, we would see two teams and an umpire in the middle, and they're sort of playing a game together. But the card about being over-focused on oneself and one's own perspective is in the problem slot, and the one who's just having fun is in the long-term solution slot. Perhaps that is the root of the solution right there. Needing to win versus needing to play. Perhaps the message is this: if all you are focused on is your personal need to win, then you are not taking in the entire game. Try instead to expand your awareness to the big picture. Or maybe you just gotta sort of brain hack yourself, so try this. If you play to win, you only win when you win. If you play to play, you always win. The Sesamerot has spoken. I'm seeing the red triangle, a sign of passionate thought, followed by the bat, a sign of decisive action, and then concluded with the rainbow, a sign of seeking our own joy. I take all of this as a sign that you have made your decision. The decision has been made. So at this point, confronting your parents at all with this decision would be a courtesy to loop them in on the decision. So the real question is, do you wish to give them an opportunity to change your mind? It is important to note, once you are 18, you have the ability to make life decisions for yourself. Looping them in is neither owed nor required. Confronting them in person gives them an opportunity to argue their case and possibly change your mind. So, are you open to new information and having your mind changed? If so, confront in person. If not, send the letter. The Sesamerot has spoken. In the problem slot, we're seeing Rosita with the rainbow. As this is appearing in your problem slot, it does speak of wishful thinking, which draws a stark contrast to the kite we're seeing in the short-term solution slot. The kite is your toy that you got to put a little work in to make it work, and it goes where you lead it. So why are we seeing these two things? Well, let's think about the nature of the question you've asked. Should you tell somebody that you like them or wait for the relationship to build? But see, here's the thing. If you're just sitting and waiting for the relationship to build, you're not taking any control over where the relationship goes in the first place. Consider the two boats in the long-term solution slot. For now, these two boats are roughly in the same area. They're both going in roughly the same direction, but you can't tell from the context of the picture if they're both going to the same spot. Every moment that they are together, these two boats, is an opportunity for the captains to lean over the side and say, hey, where are you going? You want to go to the same place I'm going? Are we even going to the same place? Let's figure it out. Be bold and brave enough to set the direction of the relationship early, and you'll know sooner rather than later if you're even both going to the same place. The Sesamerot has spoken. As regular viewers will know, the Two of Tutus is one of my favorite cards, but it appears for you here in the problem slot. Probably a sign that this is one of those things that you really do have to take seriously. Now, it's very interesting that you got the mop in your short-term solution slot. Now, obviously, you're looking to clean your personal area, right? But see, this could have just as easily been the vacuum, which is a card about preparing a space for the sake of others. The mop is about preparing a space for the sake of yourself. So your first step is to prepare those spaces hygienically. That's mopping, that's dusting, that's getting everything out of there that's not good for you. Now, the four beanies is about classification. Everything has its place. So organize. Your productive spaces should be productive. Your comfortable spaces should be comfortable, and nary the two shall meet. And it's far easier to organize a space if you're working from a blank slate. The Sesamerot has spoken. So the problem card here has a couple of meanings. First off, this is the third time I've gotten a question about should I continue pursuing my art in a very short period of time. The second is the Sesamerot passing me a little message by giving me the Three of Webs. You see, this kind of thinking is a trap. And yet, just like a spider's web, it is also a part of nature. Artists, listen closely. Part and parcel with being an artist is doubt, especially doubting yourself. As an artist, you are tapping into self-expression. What are you expressing? Your emotion. What is disappointment and discouragement? Those are emotions. It's no different from any other walk of life. If you're a boxer, you leave yourself open to the very real possibility you're going to get punched in the gut from time to time. You want to be a skateboarder? You leave yourself open to the possibility that you're going to land on your crotch from time to time. Discouragement is the artist's version of taking a handrail to the Gonardleys. Fortunately, coping with it doesn't take quite as much energy as dealing with it, as we can see from the Two of Tutus. As you know, one of my favorite cards in the Sesamerot. Discouragement and sadness are emotions, but you know what else are emotions? Joy, levity, laughter. Those are the artist's equivalent of landing that grinded ollie with your Gonardleys intact. A joy which you can greater appreciate having had your Gonardleys busted before. In other words, the discouragement you feel now is all about making the joys you feel later that much more joyous. Now let me switch away from Gonardleys for a minute and into math. 3 plus 2 equals 5. And yet in the long-term solution slot we see the 15 of trucks. There's 10 missing if we're doing any sort of simple addition. What is that 10? Well, the answer is right there in the card. It's your drive. It's your willingness to keep on trucking. And you'll notice it is the greatest part of the equation. Expressing joy and pain, those are the real points of art. So what's this other 2/3 of it all about here? Well, when a lot of people talk about getting discouraged and pursuing their dream, what they're really talking about is doing their art for a living. They don't want to risk their Gonardleys for the joy of not busting their Gonardleys. They want to get paid for busting their Gonardleys. Listen, if somebody comes to me saying, should I pursue my dream? My answer is always going to be yes. But that's a very specific answer. Should you chase your dreams? Yes. But I don't know if you got the equipment to chase the dreams or not. Only you know that. So the real question is, do you got the drive? A good sign of knowing if you got the drive or not is if you actually reach this point at which you are successful in the way you think success looks, would you still keep going because it's just what you want to do? If you were going to keep doing it anyway, well, you might as well keep doing it now. The Sesamerot has spoken. The Sesamerot likes to think of rectangles as squares under pressure, and the yellow rectangle is a sign that you're definitely feeling the pressure. It's probably very hard for you to think of your situation as a gift, and yet it may be. Speaking of gifts, let's consider the 6 bags of birdseed here. If you was to give 6 bags of birdseeds to the Count, he would count them, right? But if you was to give 6 bags of birdseed to Elmo, you'd have no idea what to do with them. The lesson is that not all gifts are for all people, but oh, what's this? At the top of the ladder, there's a little bird. Well, it's the top bird. That's the best bird, and I bet the best bird would think that the birdseed was the best gift. So hey, maybe a previous person didn't know what to do with 6 bags of birdseed, but you know what? Climb a little and I think you'll find somebody who does. The Sesamerot has spoken. Notice how the 9 card is actually representing the letter N and not the number 9. Furthermore, if the Count was counting to 9, he would have 9 objects, but he's only got 1 object, which is the number 9. Pretty confusing situation, yes? A situation that becomes clearer and less confusing if you look at it from all angles and not just your own perspective. You're not doing anything wrong because there's nothing you can do about the feelings and agency of another person. The only thing you can control, truly, is yourself and your own feelings and actions. Think of this pink circle here as containing all of the things that you're interested in about other people. If what you seek is a relationship with someone who is interested in you, then expand your circle and open your mind to everyone that shows an interest. The Sesamerot has spoken. So something interesting I just noticed about Grover here in the problem slot. It says that he's hot, but I can't help but remember that Grover usually doesn't wear clothes. It's observations like this that have made me an expert in Muppet psychology. But really, it doesn't take an expert. You just gotta have your eyes open and watch for the signs. Perhaps the solution to your dopamine problem is not one of addition, but of subtraction. Because I bet Grover would feel a heck of a lot better if he got rid of those warm clothes on a hot day. Now in the long-term slot is the square card, which is the unqualified gift card of the deck. The message, to me at least, is pretty clear. Simplification. Get rid of complications and take joy in small, simple things. The Sesamerot has spoken. Your problem is being defined here by the 12 of doodlebugs. All different colors, all different types, and yet all did the same thing and flew into your past. Now you ask, am I the problem? No, you're not the problem, because if you were, you'd be in the problem slot and not these 12 goofballs. So we know you're not the problem. Are you the solution? Well, let's take a look at this. We got the vacuum card right here, which is a card about preparing a space for others. And that leads into the dry card. Drying is something we do after we cleanse ourselves. You'll notice in this card, it's not something that they're doing alone. Maybe, in fact, the problem is that the world needs more parental figures that don't do this thing. And perhaps that problem is being revealed to you so that you know what it's like and you can prepare a solution for others who don't have to face the same things you did. You are not the problem, but you could be the solution. The Sesamerot has spoken. Now, the mop is normally a card about self-cleansing and preparing a space for yourself that's hygienic. For you, this appears in the problem slot. This is probably a sign that you're preparing yourself for the wrong thing. And when an artist talks about not being good enough, it's usually a sign that they're preparing themselves for disappointment. That is something we in the divination cycles like to call a self-fulfilling prophecy. Notice how Rosita points to the rainbow here in the short-term solution slot. This is a sign of hope. And more simply, a sign that we all like to look at pretty colors. Meanwhile, the 11 of Worms in the long-term solution slot talks about how cycles may not necessarily be pretty, but they get things done. Talent is passion made manifest, and those worms really want that rainbow. So if you truly want to be an artist, the trick is to keep being not good at it until you are good at it. The Sesamerot has spoken. Well, you got the umpire appearing in your problem slot here, which tells me that this is a lot about rules and how you think they should be enforced. The thing is, gender is more of a big ball of wibbly-wobbly, gendery-wendery stuff. An idea which plays well with Supergrover flying high in the short-term solution slot. See, Supergrover only lands if there's a problem, so if Supergrover is still flying, must not be a problem. Of course, the common theme I'm seeing is fuzzy critters wearing costumes to show you what role they play. And yet in the long-term solution slot, we're seeing the one of teddy bears, which has no costume whatsoever. Teddy bear's just teddy bear. Costumes and uniforms are about who we have to be given the particular time and context, but at the core of the whole thing, you're still just you. So it's perfectly okay to be whatever you feel like being. The Sesamerot has spoken. This red triangle in the problem slot is there for a reason. It's to remind you that this was a thing you absolutely had to do. I believe this is why the quilt card in the short-term solution slot is counseling you to take comfort in the fact that you did in fact make the right decision. Keep in mind that a quilt is made up of a bunch of pieces of things put together into one big piece of fabric. So don't focus on any of the little things that might put you into a little bit of doubt. No, you're focusing on the big picture. What you did was the right thing for all those reasons. And the 15 of trucks is instructing you to have the drive to stick to your guns on this one. Also notice there's a red triangle patch right there in the quilt. This tangible proof that you can take bold steps in your own self-care should empower you, and you deserve it. The Sesamerot has spoken. Your problem is being defined here by the 13 of macrolones, which is fascinating to me. Check this out. See, this is a card that's got a bunch of little mylar balloons on the front of it, if it'd ever focus. But, you know, they could also look like a sky full of butts, or a bunch of yo-yos, or a bunch of macaroon cookies. I mean, you know, it really just depends on how you look at it. It's sort of the gist of the card. So why is this in the problem slot? Well, my theory is that we got to change our perspective a little bit on what it is you're looking for here. For one thing, you're asking, is this job a good fit for you? And not the more important question, are you a good fit for the job? The igloo in the short-term slot sort of points to what it is we're looking for here. In part because this is a card that talks about introspection, you know, going off and thinking about things. Very similar to the Hermit in Tarot. But more to the point, Ernie knew he was going to be going out into the cold wilderness, and what did he do? He brushed up on his igloo building skills and brought a warm coat. Probably not what Ernie would ideally be doing with his time, but he had the skill set and he had the tools for the job. He's doing what needs to be done and he knows how to do it, but he's not trying to make this his entire life. But I think the other underlying message we can get here is that Ernie's got a little smile on his face, because even though this is a rough environment for a lot of people, Ernie can tolerate it. He would certainly much rather be at home with Bert, but he's out here building an igloo. So, step one is to think of things in terms of skill set and tolerance. Which brings us nicely to the long-term solutions slot. We got Elmo at the bottom of the ladder. And I believe this is a call for you to think about your own long-term plans for success. See, we can't tell from the context of this picture if Ernie is holding the ladder for someone else or getting ready to climb it himself. We don't know that, but presumably Elmo does. And there it is again, that little smile, that little hint of confidence, just like we saw with Ernie. Elmo knows what Elmo's doing, and Elmo's happy with it. So, put it all together, and I read it like this. Match your skill set and your tolerance levels with what it is you are working towards in the long term. And always remember, the job isn't applying for you, you're applying for the job. And most importantly, don't think of a job as where you're going to always be. An igloo is not a permanent enclosure for you to live in. Nobody's putting up wallpaper. Eventually, you're hoping to go places. The Sesamerot has spoken. So the thing with the one of duckies is, a rubber ducky is something that you take with you to the bath, but it's not necessarily something that you carry with you all throughout life. In this way, we think of the rubber ducky as a sometimes friend, or someone that's just there to fulfill a purpose. Speaking as a fellow artist, I know it is very tempting sometimes to treat ourselves in this same way. Like, think of it this way. You can only exist as an artist in this current environment for so long and see people for so long be like, hey, when is George R. R. Martin going to write another book? When is so-and-so going to put out another album? You hear all that, and then you start having those same expectations for yourself. The reason that one of Duckies is sitting in the problem slot right now is because that sort of thinking is a problem. You and your creativity is not a rubber ducky that just comes out during bath time, okay? You are a complete, whole human being. It would be ridiculous to ask you to run a marathon without having some food at some point in the recent past. Just so, it would also be ridiculous to ask you to create new things if you are not being inspired in any way by any outside influences. But yes, I get it. It is very frustrating when you really want that inspiration to come in, and it just doesn't. So how do we feed this need? Well, for starters, we see the vacuum card here in the short-term solution slot. The vacuum is a cleansing card, but specifically refers to the environment around you rather than the self. This speaks of making the space around you clean and receptive to new inspiration coming your way. But see, here's the other thing about inspiration. It's a bit of a chaos art. It is, in fact, a form of magic in a lot of ways, and that's why we're seeing the 5 of Wizard hats here in the long-term solution slot, because that's what we're working towards, bringing the magic back. On a side note, think about this. I want you to do a little experiment. Take an object, just like a baseball or something like that, and hold it at arm's length. Don't do nothing except hold that ball at arm's length over as long as you can tolerate it, which is a key note there, because you're going to notice you can't do that forever. And the longer you try to force yourself to hold that baseball out like that, the more it's going to hurt after a while. So listen, it's totally normal that the creative parts of your brain are going to need a little rest and relaxation after a while, so why not spend that relaxation time preparing your space? You know, just putter around the house, do some chores for a while. Make space in your life for doing things other than guitar. Give yourself opportunities to be inspired. Again, I cannot stress this enough. What you are experiencing is completely natural in creative cycles. So instead of making the music right now, just make a space for more music to come. The Sesamerot has spoken. Notice how we got the blue triangle, a shape with 3 points, being pushed until it becomes a green hexagon, a shape with 6 points. How do we get from blue to green? And if I recall my color theory, that requires the color yellow. In the solution slots, the color yellow is often considered the color of value because it's very close to gold, while blue is the color of logic, and of course, the triangle is the symbol of thought. And of course, the hexagon is the Sesamerot symbol of life. Put it all together, and I read it like this. You are locked into the mental concept that your studies are super important, absolving yourself of the responsibility of understanding what it is that is valuable to you, like for realsies. The push card's telling you to go in the opposite direction. Do not clear your mind. Fill it with the missing component, the yellow triangle. Make yourself a priority, and the rest will come naturally. The Sesamerot has spoken. The Nine of Butterflies in the problem slot is a card that speaks of transformations. Normally, the concept of transformation is not a problem, but for you in this reading, it is. Possibly a sign that you are thinking of changing the wrong thing. Now, in our short and long-term solution slots, we're seeing the X-ray followed by the 13 of Macroloons. The 13 of Macroloons is a card about seeing things from our own perspective, while the X-ray is a card of introspection. I think if you take a closer look at your info dumping, you will find that there are people that see it not as a problem, but as a fascinating thing. So, the transformation you're considering, which is stopping, is probably not the best course of action. Instead, you should transform who it is you info dump to. Seek out the company of those that see you and like you for exactly who you are already. The Sesamerot has spoken. So the cards are forming an interesting tableau here. Notice the 10 of fruits in the center, and on either side is a character holding a piece of food in pretty much the same pose. In the problem slot, a tomato, which is a kind of fruit, but lots of kids don't like tomatoes. And in the long-term solution slot, the cookie. Kids are pretty fond of those. The key to conquering any fear is to first understand it. I believe this tableau represents the conflict that your inner child is going through. The world says you're supposed to prefer fruits, but your inner child knows a tomato is a fruit, and you don't like tomatoes. Conversely, your inner child wants a cookie, but a cookie is not a fruit. Now, with that understood, what if we operate on the assumption that this is merely an illusion created by people's expectations? What if the simplest solution is to simply be honest that we don't want any of this and we just want a cookie? In short, go have the cookie. The Sesamerot has spoken.
I'll take a swing at this one.
So we've got the 8 of triangles here in the problem slot, which represents all of the different human perspectives that might be in play when somebody goes to talk to a divination artist. Rosita's rainbow here in the short-term solution slot represents some of the paths that a divination artist might point out towards the 10 of fruits in the long-term solution slot, which points out all the different destinations to which they might like to go. So are all of these people here destined to follow the path and go to the fruits that they want to go to? No, of course not. They have the free will to ignore the advice. They also possess the free will to seek a second opinion. Remember something here, divination artists aren't showing you the future, they're showing you a future. And it is up to you to decide if you want it to be your future. That's your job, not mine. The Sesamerot has spoken. Here in the problem slot, we have Rosita holding a tomato out for us here. Now, the tomato typically symbolizes a gift that, while it's given with the best of intentions, we don't all know exactly what to do with it. I mean, some people don't like tomatoes, some people are allergic to tomatoes, but nonetheless, Rosita's giving that gift from a good place. Of course, depending on the nature of this particular friendship, maybe they were trying to tell you something about your lovemaking. So, maybe consider the advice of the rabbit here in the short-term solution slot. You see, the amazing Mumford is a magician, so when he pulls a rabbit out, you know that he's done the magic correctly. And how do you get there? Practice. And that's where the pink circle in the long-term solution slot comes in. It's all about finding a trick that you're good at doing and then doing it repeatedly, probably in a circular motion. The Sesamerot has spoken. So we've got a blue triangle showing up here in your problem slot. I think that means there's a problem with your logic on this one. You cannot, by definition, retain hope for something and let go at the same time. What you can do is put your past into perspective, and that is what's happening here in the rhombus kite card. Now notice that this kite is made of more than just blue triangles. It's also got some red and yellow in there. This is part of a complex understanding that this relationship was indeed part of your past, part of your formation and who you are now. You can accept and even take joy in your past without having to constantly relive it. And that is what the vacuum card is talking about here in your long-term solution slot. Instead of preparing yourself for one maybe, why not prepare yourself for all possibilities? The Sesamerot has spoken. In the problem slot, we're seeing the Black Pentagon. Now, this is a card of dark secrets. And usually the Sesamerot throws this one up when it turns out there's maybe some information the Sesamerot doesn't want to reveal. However, it cannot be understated that this card is appearing in the problem slot, meaning secrecy might just be the problem. Looking ahead to the long-term solution slot, we're seeing the purple oval. Now, the oval is a shape that shows up in the Sesamerot typically to represent cycles of some kind, more to the point like realistic cycles that have short parts, long parts, hard parts, simple parts, etc. And purple is a combination of blue and red, which are the colors of logic and passion, respectively. However, I can't help but notice that the problem is a sharp, pointy, dark shape, and then the long-term solution is a much smoother shape that's showing all the complexities of what it's like to truly be alive. What gets you from there to there? Well, here's the two of tutus. Now, as longtime viewers will know, this is one of my favorite cards because it's a pun. Two, tutus. It's a tutus. You get it? And I often like to describe this as the whistle while you work card. It's about having a little bit of fun with it, but I think the overall message that's actually getting thrown in here is it's about injecting a little bit of joy into your work. What is it you're going to enjoy doing? So what I'm reading from this here is that if you were to in fact publish your memoirs, it would be something that would bring you joy. And I can't help but notice that nowhere in the reading are we seeing anything about your parents. Now, there's two ways of looking at this. The first, more callous reason might be that maybe they are not a factor in your decision-making on this one. The second is that if they was concerned about being written about in a negative light, well, they shouldn't have done stuff that would get them written about in a negative light. Now, I will say on a more practical level that you could probably use your second draft as an opportunity to sort of look over the things you've written about your parents and give those a little bit of thought and decide if you can empathize or what you can see from that, or even just examine it closer and say, no, I was right the first time. But at the end of the day, or more to the point, at the end of the manuscript, this is a project for you. So focus on whatever it is that's going to give you the joy and the closure that you're looking for from this project. The Sesamerot has spoken. So on the problem slot, we're looking at the rhombus kite. There are a few cards that are such a clear metaphor for doing some traveling to get a new perspective, and yet I wonder why it's in your problem slot. This may be a warning that you have set some high expectations for what you expect to find in Ireland. I mean, it's not all bad. A 5 of nightcaps, for example, is often a sign of wizard hats. It's a stand-in for wizard hats, which means you bring in the magic, and the yellow rectangle as a long-term solution slot usually means great riches. Who knows, maybe you'll be the one to find the gold pot at the end of the rainbow. So I think the overall message here is you will find good things there, but they may not be the things you were going to look for. So, I won't say lower your expectations, but be prepared to temper them. The Sesamerot has spoken. In the problem slot, we're seeing the Amazing Mumford holding an alligator, which is not something you'd expect Amazing Mumford to be holding after doing a magic trick. He's supposed to be pulling out a rabbit. Clearly, mistakes were made. Well, there's one way of looking at it. There is actually another way we could be looking at that situation, and it's to say mistakes were identified. See, the two-headed monster has the ability to look at a situation from all sides. Combine this approach with the scientific method, and hey, look at this, you've actually got data and evidence. Now, changing your way of thinking is a complex process, hence people. It's also sort of a cycle. You gotta kind of keep doing it to practice. But if you start thinking of your imperfections as teachable moments, then you won't fear making them so much. The Sesamerot has spoken. Your problem is being defined by Elmo in the umpire costume. Philosophy is more art than science. At its heart, a game we play. And at best, a mental exercise. That's probably why we're seeing Super Grover flying high in the short-term solution slot. You see, if Super Grover's flying, that means there's no problem. He only lands when there's a problem. Following up on that is the quilt card, which is when you take a bunch of little things and combine them into a bigger thing that sort of gives you some comfort. It's important to remember that the rules and guidelines that we set down in these situations is all about making the game more fun, not just for yourself, but everybody. And if one of the rules is making things less fun for yourself or others, take it out. Rip that patch off the quilt. It's your cape to mess with. Alternately, this could just be telling you to be more like Grover and less like Elmo, which is good advice in general. This Sesamerot has spoken. Typically, when the eggs come up in the problem slot, what we're seeing is a lot of potential. In a general manner of speaking, yes, your art absolutely is worth pursuing. There's a lot of potential there. However, when we ask about making ends meet, we're talking about can we use this art to support ourselves, and the wet card has given us a little clue on how that happens. Every artist wants to think of themselves as the Ernie in this situation where everybody else is working around them. But no, for your art to truly have money-making potential, you gotta be the Bert here, cleaning up after everybody else. So the key to making money with your art is not to just do your own thing, it's to take messages from others. When you open yourself to doing your art as a job for others, that's when the paychecks start flowing in. The Sesamerot has spoken. You know, I can't believe this situation has never come up sooner, but you have drawn both the cold card in your problem slot and the igloo in your short-term solution slot, which both use the same image. Furthermore, what's interesting is that in the short-term solution slot, we're seeing the cold card, which is a pretty basic card. It means cold. But the igloo card often represents either resourcefulness or introspection. It's very similar to the hermit in tarot that way. Which probably means the only thing that's really changed here is that you've started putting more thought into it. Now, in the long-term solution slot, we've got the Count in the Knight card. Now, the Knight is full of stars, and yet he's focusing on the single brightest one. When you consider your beliefs, which ones are they that most draw your attention and give you the most hope? Your truth may not be in an unchanging past. It may instead be in an infinite future of possibilities. The Sesamerot has spoken. The octagon is the most complicated shape in the Sesamerot, and a pink octagon often speaks of the nature of life. This is indeed a complex situation if you're the kind of person that likes to help other people, but, you yourself are a person and you like to help yourself as well. Fortunately, the safest solution is simple. You have to inform people of what has transpired. I mean, if the screams happen for a couple moments and then stop, then whatever's out there that made the screaming start is probably still out there. And if it goes on for a longer period of time, then really only professionals are equipped to deal with the situation. Which is where the X-ray comes in. It's a diagnostic tool used by professionals to examine a spooky situation. It's probably the best course of action. If you was just to go out there yourself, there'd be two people screaming in the woods at night. The Sesamerot has spoken. All right, full disclosure, this question comes to me from a very good friend and collaborating partner, Seraphim. We have edited and beta read each other's work multiple times, been in frequent contact with one another, and that's sort of what makes this question very poignant, because the two of us have not been talking too much as of late. And before anybody gets any crazy ideas, that's entirely on me. To answer the question, have not really been okay. Now, I've often said that I do Sesamerot because it's fun, and I would continue to do it for as long as it was fun. And it stopped being fun for a while. Of course, so did a lot of other things, but it's just how depression works, right? And I'm not trying to play a game of who has it worse here, but I don't exactly have a Sesamerot guy I can go to, but Dr. I am Pagliacci. You know how that one goes. But again, I do have that mantra that it's okay to not be okay. And I chose to sit with these feelings and let them pass through me and process them and work with them. Now, I acknowledge and admit that I am very blessed to have lots of people in my life that if I chose to reach out to them and speak to them, I could. And I'm grateful for that. But a lot of the feelings I'm feeling, I need to process on my own. Part of the reason for that is because a lot of the issues I'm experiencing actually have to do with what I would consider a toxic amount of contact with social media as of late. Now, part of this is necessitated by my job. As some of you know, I edit video for Stephanie Sterling over at the Gymquisition. It's a job I very much enjoy doing because I like editing video. And Stephanie Sterling is a fabulous person to work for. Could not ask for a better client. It is nonetheless a job that has me very exposed to all the worst elements of social media on a near constant basis, and it's hitting me pretty hard. And, well, that's kind of made it hard for me to come back and be a part of the very same system that I feel is doing terrible things to people's brains. But that's just how I feel about it right now, and it's bound to change. People change all the time. So I'm going to give myself the space and the grace to change into whatever it is I need to be next. And maybe that'll be a person that feels better about social media. Maybe it'll be a person that doesn't. Either way, it'll be the genuine, authentic me, and that's the only person to whom I am beholden. It's just as true of me as it is of all of you. So tell you what, let's make a deal. I'll be good to myself, you all be good to yourselves, and I'll see you when I see you, okay? Sesamerot has spoken. Be well. And thanks, Seraphim. It is often said the Sesamerot doesn't stutter, and the fact that the different card is in your problem slot is definitely an example of it. Your willingness to go to bed has been a solution for so many other people, but you see yourself as different from those other people. Now let's look briefly at the long-term solution slot. That's Bert and Ernie's putting the rectangles back in the rectangles box. It's a job that needs to be done, and everybody can do it. So think of it this way. The Sesamerot's telling you going to bat for people is a job that everybody should be doing, and we should all be doing for each other. But Ernie is appearing in both this card and this card, which is a sign that everybody includes you. Nothing in your life happens without you. You are the most important person in your own life. But more than that, you are still a person. So give yourself the same grace you give everybody else, because you are part of everybody. The Sesamerot has spoken. The vacuum is often a card about preparing a space for others. For you, this appears in the problem slot for some reason, which may reflect the anxiety you have about what others think. And while one way of dodging the ill effects of criticism is to simply not care what others think, the other one is just to really be good at what you're doing. For that, the Sesamerot recommends 7 parts practice to 2 parts flair. The 7 of Porridges is often a card that's calling us to take on a daily routine that is good for us. And while porridge may not appear to be the most exciting meal, it's what we got and we're going to like it. Now, the 2 of Tutus is one of my favorite cards because it's a pun. 2, 2, tutus. Get it? Somebody's job was to make this flashcard to teach little kids the number 2, but they found a way to make it fun. And as you practice, you will find ways to make it fun for yourself as well. The Sesamerot has spoken. Well, I can certainly vouch for one of your health problems being a chronic case of potty mouth. However, given that we are seeing Oscar over here cradling an orange in a suspect way, in a drawing about your health concerns, it's pretty clear why you have a preference for pejoratives at this particular time. Now, all things considered, I do prefer to stray away from any sort of medical advice. That said, the fact that we're seeing the 11 of worms in your short-term solution slot, not the greatest sign, huh? That, paired with the out card in the long-term solution slot, speaks to something that needs to come out of you. Now let me draw a nice big thick line underneath this next bit. I should not be giving medical advice. For one thing, my main tool for diagnosis is a set of Sesame Street flashcards. And for second, if the opening joke tells you anything, I have a terrible bedside manner. But if and when, preferably when, I'm going to strongly suggest that when, you go see a medical professional, if it does turn out you got some sort of parasites in you or something like that, maybe throw me a little shout out for being so accurate, huh? In any case, I'm wishing you the best of luck in getting a second opinion from somebody whose medical equipment is actually medical equipment. The Sesamerot has spoken. Alright, I'm gonna be honest, the presence of the Great Pentagon might be my fault a little bit. You see, I couldn't help but meditate a little bit on how many times people ask sort of vague, open-ended questions that seem like they're designed to see if I can actually read minds. And as the old expression goes, the Sesamerot does not stutter. What is going on with this question here is something that is common to lots of folks that try to do divination stuff online, which is that you get somebody that challenges you to solve for X, but doesn't give you any of the clues necessary for X solving. So I think the problem here is being defined by the Sesamerot as move on from what? Because in the general sense, we know to move on when we're done with whatever it is we're at. If you're full, you stop eating, you move on from the dinner table. But every situation has its own full state. I think that's why we're seeing the 13 of Macroloons again. You may remember from a recent video that the 13 of Macroloons could look like a lot of things. Just depends on how you're looking at it. So, in short, if what you're looking for is a specific indicator of where this questioner personally needs to know when it's time to move on, well, that's a difficult question for me to answer because I might not be looking at things the same way that they are. It's when everybody's on the same page, it's when everybody agrees on what these 13 things in the card actually look like to them, that we can make those sort of determinations. Now, just so I gotta make the final thesis as clear as possible, I'm gonna revisit what I was saying at the beginning. Please do not think that I am singling you out or anything like that. This is just sort of a thing that needs to be talked about. And ironically, the thing that needs to be talked about is things that need to be talked about. In the divination arts, we talk about a thing called transference of energy. Now, depending on whether you're a spiritual or energy worker or, like me, a secular reader, that can mean different things. But what it generally means is there is a sharing of energy and a sharing of information between the questioner and the reader. A lot of that process is missing when you're trying to do things on the internet, and even more so when we're doing sort of a cold thing like this, where somebody's asking a question in the comment section. I gotta just answer it based on nothing but that information. In essence, I'm being asked to make a judgment based on a lot of missing information because the communication's not clear. So if you want to know if it's time to move on, there's two pretty easy indicators. The first is, after clear communication, are we still not meeting eye to eye? That's a good time to move on. Another good indicator is when somebody is strangely addicted to staying in the dark on this whole process. So if you've said your piece and nothing changes, I guess that's a good time to go out. And on that note, the Sesamerot has spoken. Well, once again, the Sesamerot doesn't stutter. You've got Oscar holding out an orange here in your problem slot. A sign that you have, in fact, received a nourishing gift, but not to put too fine a point on it, you know where those hands have been. However, take a gander here at the short-term solution slot. We are seeing Grover with the quilt. Now, as I've often said about the quilt card, the idea is to take all kinds of tattered fragments and remnants of things and sew them together into something comforting and beautiful. However, I think we can all agree, or at least those of us that make quilts can agree, that making a quilt is hard work. Now, there are people out there that put in a good 6 to 8 hours of hard work a day and then they go home and they need a little rest because they're tired. I have the same experience when I put in roughly 12 to 15 minutes of work. Don't judge me. However, according to this question, you've been putting into work for a whole year. And don't act like that ain't an equivalency, okay? When most people go to work, they got coworkers. Doesn't mean they're not tired when they get home from a hard day of work. You've had a hard year of work. And I believe that's where the Nine of Waters comes in your long-term solution slot. At the root of all hard work is problem solving. I don't know a single person that gets up at 5 a.m. and gets ready for a day of work because it's just something they do for leisure. Nah, they're doing it because there's a problem to be solved. But see, problem solving can't be your whole life. There's got to be other things in it. There's the work you do to be able to keep doing work, and then there's the work you do, or more correctly, the after work you do, that makes it all worth it. The Nine of Waters is reminding you to take a little bit of time to take care of the person that's been doing all this hard work. I believe some communities refer to it as aftercare. Maybe now's the time to stop building the quilt just for a little bit and use it instead to cover yourself so you're nice, warm, and cozy, get yourself a nice little drink, and think about all the things that you'd like to be doing. Have time to just have a fantasy or a daydream or, I don't know, just play a video game or something. Most jobs come with a little bit of time off after a year served. I don't think yours should be any different. The Sesamerot has spoken. Over here in the problem slot, we're seeing the 20 of stars. 20 is, of course, the highest number that appears in the Sesamerot, so we must be dealing with a pinnacle of something. And I also can't help but notice that all 20 stars look exactly the same. And exactly the same is another way of saying no changes. But have you ever actually seen a picture of a real star? They come in different sizes, different colors, and all that other fun stuff. They don't even sit at the exact same distance from one another. Stars are different all the time. The fact is, change itself is actually very, very normal, as exemplified by the green oval in the short-term solution slot. All of life is indeed a constant cycle of changes. So why are we over here idealizing this idea that things can just stay the same and uniform all the time? So perhaps it's not the change itself that's difficult. Change happens naturally. I think what's difficult is trying to keep things the same all the time. Now you'll notice that constant cycle is being represented by an oval, is to represent sometimes there's longer bits, shorter bits, sometimes you got to turn more drastically, sometimes it's a little more of a lazy turn. Even change itself happens in different ways. But notice how Oscar over here in the long-term solution slot is holding an orange, which is perfectly round and roughly the same color as those stars from the problem slot. Now I'll be the first to defend Oscar showing up in a reading as a bad thing. And that is, anybody trying to offer you the idea that things can just stay the same all the time is speaking from a place of garbage. Now, the Sesamerot is trying to remind us in this particular situation that change itself is very easy, and it's dealing with the change that is hard. And, of course, to beware the advice of anybody that tells you change is a thing you can avoid. But I think this is an opportunity for us to sit here and think about what is it about changes that make us think that it's hard. And I'm going to go ahead and speak over the Sesamerot on this one when I say the hard part is releasing control. Chances are, if you're watching this, you are used to a lifestyle where it's you telling other things what to do. You push the little spots on your little screen there, and the little device does what you want it to do. You tell the robot to draw you something, and the robot draws it. You're very used to being the one in the driver's seat, and change, which happens inevitably no matter what, is going to happen without you having to say one thing or another. So the bottom line is, change is only as hard as you make it. If you accept the inevitability of change, then that gives you the tools to prepare for it and work with it and flow with it. It's a hard choice to make, but everything after that is smooth sailing. The Sesamerot has spoken. In the problem slot, we've got the in card. Now, a fun thing about the way eyes work, it's really hard to look at yourself without a mirror, and I don't see a mirror anywhere in this picture. In fact, where Zoe's standing, all we see is a bunch of emptiness around Zoe. Oh, but what's this here? Oh, look at all your friends coming to join you inside the box there. Seems they want to have a peek, and they see a lot of blue. Aw. The thing is, that doesn't stop the 12 doodlebugs. They continue to fly towards Zoe. They want to help Zoe out. The lesson here is twofold. First off, your friends are probably seeing things about you that you don't. And second, knowing this only makes them want to come inside the box even more. There's only one thing better than a friend, and that's a tried and true friend. Let those friends in and trust them enough to show you who they really are. The Sesamerot has spoken.